Nehemiah chapter 4, it's the walls defend against the enemy. Are you guys ready for this? Because this is about us. I know yesterday I gave the preview, or in lesson 3, if you didn't watch it yesterday, in Nehemiah 3, I gave the preview of the first verse of 4, and it says, "But it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the walls." We are the people, okay? It so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the walls, that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. Okay, so and all of that in chapter 3, just a flashback. In chapter 3, they begin to rebuild the walls. And everybody was working on one accord, except the nobles, of course. But everybody else was working on one accord, and walls were beginning to go up, and they realized that their support was still in place, and all of these great things were happening. Verse 2 says, "And he spoke before his brethren, the army of Samaria, and said," and here's what he said, "What are these feeble Jews doing?" What are these feeble Jews doing? If you received my devotionals, then you received a devotional on Nehemiah 4, but I don't know if I did a video or not, I can't remember. But what are these feeble Jews doing? When somebody thinks that you're doing something that makes no sense, when somebody thinks that they are better than you and what you are doing is a waste of your time, they call you things like feeble. And so what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Are they building up these walls to lock themselves in? Because some people think that you are building up walls around you to keep yourself closed in because you're afraid to let people in. No, the walls that are going up now are for our protection. They're for the rebuilding of Jerusalem. They're so that we can have something to stand on. And so, are they fortifying themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish? Stones that are burned? And so, right here, you have your enemy wondering why you're doing what you're doing. I don't know about you, but when people begin to wonder why I do what I do, I welcome them on the journey. You can come and watch, but you're not going to stop me. Okay. And so he's asking all of these questions. Why are they doing what they're doing? Now, Tobiah, the Ammonite, was beside him, and he said, "Whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall." If even a fox, the haters have support too. They have an entourage of their own. It's not just God's people who have people that are fighting with them. The enemy has people fighting for him. And as we say, stop letting the enemy use you. Stop allowing the enemy to use you. But here we have Tobiah, and he's an Ammonite, and so another one who supports what this person, this Sanballat, is saying. And so here we have in verse 4, and it says, "Hear, O our God," and this is Nehemiah, "Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach, turn their rebuke, turn everything that they are saying and doing to us, turn it on their own heads." And that's the blessing of Abraham. That is the blessing of Abraham, that those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. And so it says, turn it on their own heads and give them a plunder to the land of captivity. God, the same way that we have been in captivity, place them in captivity. Put them where we were. Whatever they've spoken and done to us, God, we're asking that you do it to them. Do not cover their iniquity, and do not let their sin be blotted out from before you. Here's why. Here's why. For they have provoked you to anger before the builders. And when I was reading this earlier, I began to write in the notes, "Do not touch my prophet, nor do my anointing no harm." So when he says that they have provoked you to anger, God is saying they are saying in the scripture, they're trying to come up against what you have said. There are things that God has spoken over your life, to your mother, to your grandmother, that God has said that you were going to be things and do things. And there's these enemies, these haters that rise up. And my Bible tells me that my haters, those who hate me without reason, outnumber the number of hairs on my head. So there's people who will come up against you. And this word says that, God, they have provoked you to anger. They're trying to stop the missions that you have put in place. And so then it continues and it says, "So we built the wall. The entire wall was joined together up to half of its height, for the people had a mind to work." In spite of the questions that they were being asked, in spite of the setbacks, in spite of how many times they spoke against what God was telling them to do. When I say they, I'm saying the enemies. In spite of how the enemies tried to come up against God's plan, they still made progress. They still did half of the work. And why? Because they had a mind to work. Because they had a mind to work. And so it says, "Now it happened when Sanballat," and Sanballat gets upset again, "Tobiah, the Arabs, and the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to close, that they became very angry, and all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion." They heard about it and they all came together. See, one thing you don't have to worry about is the enemy's people not coming together. The issue is that God's people don't come together. The enemy's people, they always come together. They link up wherever they go. You find them all, what do you call them in school? Mean girls. Mean girls hang with one another. You hang with dogs, you're bound to catch fleas. And so they all come together and they set up a plan and they conspire together and they come to attack Jerusalem and create confusion. There are people that are trying to come up against the walls that you are building. They are trying to bring confusion into the lives that you are restoring. You went back to your relationship. You went back to your marriage. You went back to school. You went back. Whatever you went back to and tried to rebuild, the enemy is coming and telling you that it is not worth your time to stop. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. They are conspiring against you. They are bringing confusion. I don't know what you went back to, but the enemy is coming after you. If God sent you back, then the enemy wants that plan too. And so then it continues and it says, nevertheless, we made our prayer to God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. Now that we know what you're up against, now that you know what the enemy is capable of, now that you know what the enemy is saying about you and saying against you, you have to make sure you keep watch day and night. You cannot sleep on your haters. We say your haters are sleeping on you. You can't sleep on your enemy. Your enemies are lurking in the dark. They come like a thief in the night. And so in all of this and all of these things, we get to this verse here, and it says, then Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing, and there is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall. I circled the word we because even Judah said that we statement, we have to be mindful that we are not in this alone. You are not in this battle alone. And when people around you who are on your team begin to fall off, think of a company. If one person in the company doesn't do their part, it falls on everybody. And so as long as you say we, then you know that you have to pick up where other people lack. You have to pick up where others lack. And so I begin to think of the quotes that we have in our daily day-to-day life. And the one quote that stuck out to me is, one monkey don't stop no show. One monkey don't stop no show. And so we have Judah saying we. And our adversaries said, they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. They're saying that you won't know. The enemy is telling you, you won't even see me coming. And I don't know if anybody's ever told you that before, but we have to tell the enemy that you won't even see me coming. I know that you plan to destroy what God put together. I know that you try to come up against my marriage. I know you try to come up against my ministry. I know you try to come up against everything that God has set for me to do. But you said we won't see you. No, you won't see me coming. And that's not a threat. That's a promise. And so I hear all these quotes, right? And so then it says in verse 12, so it was when the Jews who dwelt near them, they came and told us 10 times, from whatever place you turn will be upon us. From whatever place you turn, they will be upon us. No matter which way you go, somebody is going to be working against you. I don't care. You know how the saying goes, your grass is not greener on the other side. Well, it says the grass is not always greener, but the grass to me is never greener on the other side. It's just sometimes, some days you get lucky. Some days there's blessing. Some days there's favor. But we have to be mindful that the 10 warnings or the 10 times that they repeated the same thing, that no matter which way you turn, they are going to be there. Somebody is going to be plotting against you. Somebody is going to be trying to come up against what you are rebuilding, but that does not mean to stop building. It does not mean to stop the repairs. You have to continue to put the walls up. You have to continue to rely on your support system. Everything that we've learned in chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, those things have to continue to be applied. And then it says in verse 13, therefore I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall, not at the top. The men are not at the top. They're at the lower parts of the wall because they're working. We're working to build the foundation. What's at the top, whether or not I can see you coming or not, I need you to be at the foundation. I need my foundation to be secure. And then it continues at the openings, and I set people according to their families. According to their families. According to their families. You have been positioned for the family that you have. You have been positioned to build up for your children, your children's children, your children's children's children. You have been set in a position to build the foundation and set the door frames for your families. And so it continues. It continues and it says, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. Not only are you building, but you are holding on to your weapons. You are holding on to your weapons because even in the midst of your building, even when the construction is done, you have to always be ready to go into battle. And so I wrote here, anything you have built or you are building is worth fighting for. That is what this spoke to me. Anything that we have built, anything that God has us working on, if God gave it to you, it is worth fighting for. And so whatever relation, and I keep hearing relationships, I don't know who's watching this, but if you have a relationship that you are just ready to walk away from, but you realize the support system, those buttress are still there, God is telling you to fight for that thing. You have to be willing to fight these things out. Your job, some things we know it's easy to walk away. It's hard to stay and fight. But when we remain and we remember that we're the remnants, right? That God is storing us up to bring us back from all of the places that He has driven us to. And we know that God is going to equip us with everything that we need in order to fight these battles. And it says here, and I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, and to the rest of the people, the same nobles that wouldn't work with you, the same nobles that won't fight with you, the same nobles that won't build with you, the same people that are telling you that what you are doing is wrong, that what you are doing is not worth your time. It says here that He still looked upon them. He still looked upon the nobles. What God spoke to me in that moment is just because they're not working with you doesn't mean they're working against you. There are some people that just don't know how to work. Quit faulting people that haven't got on board yet. Stop faulting the people that aren't on board and begin to still let them know we're still in this thing together. I understand that you have not done your part in years, but I am still fighting for you. God gave me you. God, and I hear a country song, God gave me you. God gave me you. And so we have to stay in it together. And then it says, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your house. He said this to the nobles, the ones who weren't working. He said it to the leaders and to the rest of the people, the nobles who weren't working. He still told them, do not be afraid. I know you're still sitting here and you haven't activated the gifting. You don't believe by faith in what God is doing, but I still need you to believe. And so then it says, and it happened when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had brought their plot to nothing. And all of us returned to the wall, everyone to his work. Every single one of us returned because the enemy realized that their plan was not going to work. And when they realize their plan is not going to work, they retract. They leave. They go home. They can't stand in battle as long as you can. You are strong. You are powerful. You are mighty in battle. This is God that's on the inside of us. He's more than victorious. He can do all things but fail. And so then it continues. So it was from that time on that half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held their spears and their shields and their bows and wore armor. Half of us are working, half of us are fighting. Somebody has to fight. We might not all be fighting at the same time. We might not all be working at the same time, but we must all do our parts. And it says, and the leaders were behind all the houses of Judah. Who? The leaders. Who? The leaders. The leaders are behind all of the houses. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand, they worked at construction, and with the other hand, they held a weapon. Even when you're working, be ready for battle. I know you have worked hard at what you are doing, and at some point, and I'm talking to myself right now, at some point you just want to relax. But God says, even when you're working, be ready for battle, because as long as you're working, you got to keep that weapon in your other hand. You got to be ready to fight these battles, even when the walls are restored and you're standing behind them and the foundation is built. And then it says here, every one of the builders had his sword girdled at his side as he built. And the one who sounded the trumpet was beside me. The one who sounded the trumpet. It only takes one person to sound the alarm. You have to be willing to listen to the person who is sounding the alarm. It says, the one who sounded the trumpet was beside me. The one who sounded the trumpet, but everybody is out here wanting to sound the alarm. You can't listen to all these silent alarms going off around you. There is one sound. There is one sound, and they are standing beside the leader. They are standing there, and they are going to sound the trumpet. But until then, don't worry. Somebody's going to whisper in your ear, and they're going to tell you that things are falling apart. If that is not the person who was meant to sound the alarm, then don't worry about it. And it says in verse 19, then I said to the same nobles that didn't work in chapter 3, the rulers and the rest of the people, the work is great, and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on this wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. When you hear it, we are spread far, far apart. But when the threat is real, you will hear it. You will know it. Everything else is just a distraction. When the threat is real, you will know it, and everything else is just a distraction. And it says, so we labored and worked, and half of the men held the spears at daybreak until the stars appeared. At the same time, I also said to the people, let each man, his servant, stay the night at Jerusalem, that they may be our guard by night and our working party by day. So neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men on guard who followed me took off their clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. We will all cleanse at the same time. We are not going to cleanse until this job is done. We will not rest until this job is done. There is a time and a season where we have to be obedient. There's a time where you just have to be willing to be a little tired. I know we get tired. I know we get sick and tired of being sick and tired, but God says, I am going to send you everything that you need. I have equipped you with everything you need. I need you to be willing to build and fight. Build and fight and ignore the enemy. Ignore all of the distractions. There was something that it said here. Let me go find it. And it said in here, it says, external resistance often produces internal discouragement. External resistance builds internal discouragement. Yet one great lesson Nehemiah's story is that would not stop the project or deal with the opposition. Sometimes the work had to be reorganized, but he and all the people always returned to the wall. You might have to revamp. You might have to change the plan, but you cannot abandon the mission. You cannot abort the mission. The same people that were being lazy and not doing work, eventually they're going to line up if you just be steadfast and unmovable. Do not grow weary in your good doing. Fight for the things that God has given you. And then it says here, the people lived in the state of readiness to build or to fight, whichever was appropriate. When the trumpet sounded, everyone would rush to lend aid, to rally in times of trouble. For mutual encouragement and support produce unity. What produces unity? Mutual encouragement and support. This is how the church should respond. You are the church. You are the church in your family. Your body, your temple is the church. You should respond to issues. You should respond to the enemy by letting the enemy know that you are not going to back down. So as always, ask God to keep us and bless us and make his face shine upon us. Ask that he blesses the readers, the hearers, and the doers of his holy word. As you have gone through chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and now we are in chapter 4, and we are defending these walls against the enemy. The enemy is lurking. The more you know, the greater the greater the opposition. The more we do for God, the greater the opposition. And so continue to progress despite the oppositions. Continue to make progress despite the oppositions. And God is going to continue to keep you. If he brought you to it, he's going to see you through it. And I